So good evening to everyone. It's really good to have you with us on this, the first Tuesday evening of our Lenten Lectures. It's really good to have you with us. And I want to acknowledge this evening our guest speaker, who is an incredibly busy man and has graciously given us his time. Father Rampe Hlobo, who is a born and bred Johannesburg man. He hails out of Orlando in Soweto. He is, and since the year 2000, he's been very deeply involved with human mobility, or as some of us know it, migration issues. He has worked with the internally displaced people and refugees in the Jesuit refugee services in South Sudan, South Africa, and in the UK. He's also been the African representative to the Global Ignatian Advocacy Network migration group, and from March 2021 until December 2024, he was also the environmental justice delegate, the migration delegate, and the social apostolate delegate for the Southern African province of the Society of Jesus. Father, a very, very full life you have led, and I am sure you have much wisdom and insight to give us, and hopefully some challenges. So thank you so very much for joining us this evening. And I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the welcome. Once again, thank you for the warm welcome and the invitation to share my little experience on the issue of migration as a perilous journey and a pilgrimage of hope. So maybe I thought where we could start maybe with trying to see or to understand exactly what are we talking about when we talk about migration. So I thought maybe we should look at, when we talk of a migrant, and when you look at the definition of a migrant from the IOM, International Organization of Migration perspective, they talk of a person who has left, who has moved from home or is moving across an international border or a state, and living what would be normally her habitual or his habitual place of residence. And the person's legal state, habitual resident, regardless of the legal status, regardless of whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary, the person, the cause of the movement, or the length of stay. So basically, it's somebody who has left home, or what they would normally call home. And anyone moving from home or from one country to another is considered a migrant, unless, of course, the reasons are of specifically fleeing a war, persecution, and nowadays we also talk of environmental factors that force people to leave. So that's one category, and then we have a category of forced migrants, and generally, and this is really generally speaking, we're talking of, when we talk of forced migrants, we're talking of asylum seekers, refugees, and the internally displaced people who have been forced or to flee their homes. The asylum seekers, as we know, in this country or internationally, it's basically an individual who's seeking international protection, and they have left home because of issues that or force them to go and claim protection in another country. So basically, they are not willing to submit themselves to protection of their country. And it's important to realize that not every asylum seeker will ultimately be recognized as a refugee, which is the next step after asylum seeker stage. So the refugee, normally, generally, when we talk of the refugee, we use the definition of the 1951 Geneva Convention, which talks of a person who, owing to a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, or membership of a political or particular social group or political opinion, they have left their country, the meaning they've crossed the national frontier and are not willing to present themselves, or are unable, owing to such fear, are unwilling to avail themselves to the protection of their country. So that would be a refugee, and then they seek protection in another country. Of course, with the internally displaced, then it's people who have moved from home and are displaced into a different part of the country. So those are just some of the technical terms that are used in this area of human mobility or migration, if you will. And when in the area of protection, there are three categories that we talk of. We talk of the country of origin, where basically it's where the person which moves is coming from, home, national country, or the habitual residence of a person. Then the transit country, and we see that a lot in the African continent, where people move from their country and they transit through one or two or three or even four other countries before they reach what would be the country of destination, where they would want to seek protection or asylum, as it were. Now, migration has become topical and pertinent because of the unprecedented numbers that we see. We have realized that over the years, the number of migrants or people who have left what they would, under normal circumstances, call home has increased. And recently, I think we're talking of over 281 million migrants. That should be the statistics that came out end of 2023, beginning of 2024, which is like 3.6 to 4% of the total human population. It's not a big number when you look at it with regards to the number of people, but it's a lot when you look at the number of people who have been forced to leave their homes. UNHCR gives us statistics. I think in mid-2024, we were talking of about 122.6 million forcibly displaced people all over the world, and with refugees amounting to about over almost 44 million with the stats that we received in end of 2023. We have about 7 million, almost 7 million asylum seekers, and 68.3 million internally displaced people, with 10 million who are stateless. Stateless meaning that they do not belong to any country. They hold no country has given them any form of citizenship, as it were. So these are the numbers that are really gradually growing and cause for concern, as it were. But what is important and what we need to realize is that behind these numbers, we're talking of human beings. We're talking about human beings like me and you, human beings who carry the same image of God that we do. You know, we are all created in the same image of God. Our faith teaches us that, and not only, all the Abrahamic faith, like the Jewish tradition, the Islamic tradition, and the Christian tradition, we believe that every human being has been created in the image of God, the Imago Dei. And with that Imago Dei comes human dignity that we talk a lot about in the social teaching of the church. And we also say, we talk a lot about protecting that image of God in each and every one of us. They are human beings like us with the human dignity, and that human dignity is further enforced by the incarnation. According to the Christian tradition, we believe that the incarnation, the word that became flesh, further reinforces the human dignity that we find in each and every one of us, in each and every human being, as it were. the human dignity, of course, is one of the principles of this Catholic social teaching. Scripture teaches us also about this importance of human beings being respected and be treated with the dignity with which they deserve. Of course, all that we see in the Catholic social teaching. So it's crucial that for us to remember that we are not only talking about numbers. We are not only talking about 281 million people who have left home, but we are talking about human beings like us, created in the image of God and with human dignity, as Scripture and the Catholic social teaching informs us. So migration is a perilous journey. So we talk of perilous journey because of the vulnerability that we see in the whole process of migration, from the country of origin to the countries of transition in many cases, and in the host countries or the country of destination. There is a lot of vulnerability involved in that movement. We see emotional and physical tolls. Some of them, they have left or they are forced to leave their homes. That is the push and pull factors that make them leave homes. Some of them, they include emotional and physical tolls. For example, if you look at many of the African young men who we've heard about drowning in the Mediterranean Sea, many of them, they would have traveled from areas like the West Africa through the Sahel region in North Africa, the Sahara Desert, into the Maghreb region, trying to find hope in Europe or other countries, the Western countries. And they take these perilous journeys, like going through these boats that you see in the pictures. That's just one example. Some of them, they are transported in containers by trucks and all that. Some, they make it, some they don't. So the journeys are very, very dangerous, as it were, and in many cases, fatal, as it were. Their vulnerability is further enforced again by the uncertainties that they face. You know, if we take that example, of course, of the people who are trying to find better lives, be it through the Sahel region, be it traveling from the Horn of Africa to Southern Africa into South Africa, there are lots of uncertainties that they face. There are lots of dangers along the way, including being robbed, including losing all their belongings. So the journey itself, it's not guaranteed that they will reach their destination, but they dare to take that perilous journey, as it were. There's a lot of violence involved. We know that when they travel through these countries, be it in the Sahara Desert, be it along the way from the Horn of Africa into Malawi, into Kenya, into Malawi, into Mozambique, into South Africa, for example, there's a lot of violence involved in the ways, being robbed, and some are killed. With the Zimbabweans, for example, coming through the Limpopo, crossing through the Limpopo River, some of them, they would face the issue of, having to cross the river, the crocodile-infested river. If they make it into South Africa side, then they are sometimes robbed or in the case of women, robbed and raped by those magomas who normally operate along the Limpopo River or the border there. So there's a lot of violence involved in the journey, and that increases the uncertainty and the vulnerability. The loss of property it's one of those characteristics of the journey. And ultimately, in some cases, in many cases, as it were, there's loss of life for others, as we have heard in many instances, especially in the Mediterranean Sea, trying to cross into Europe. So when we talk of migration as a pilgrimage of hope, I think we looking at a journey of many who have experienced these push factors violation of human rights, persecutions in their countries. Of course, as we saw in the definition of a refugee, many of these people, they leave their countries not because they are willing to leave home, but because they are forced by circumstances, including violation of human rights and persecutions, especially those who are opinionated, who are holding certain political positions, and who are challenging, let's say, injustices in their countries. So we find a situation whereby many of them, they are forced to leave their homes, economic hardships in many countries due to factors like corruption or selfishness of politicians and people, politicians in government and so forth. People are being forced to face economic hardships, which force them to leave homes and their homes and go and seek better lives elsewhere and in other countries. The environmental crisis, we see nowadays how the extreme weather patterns, it's either, in many countries, it's either too dry, too hot, or there's lots of flooding happening, extreme weather patterns forcing people to leave their homes. And of course, we have wars. We know, for example, in the Eastern DRC, we've had this war that has been going on forever, and we have many other protracted situations of wars that force people to continually leave homes, seeking safety in other countries. So pilgrimage of hope, migration is a meaningful transformative journey. So it's a situation whereby now people, they leave their homes with the hope that what they have been experiencing will be transformed into something that will be meaningful and create hope and help them to pick up the pieces, as it were, and to live their lives in dignity and in safety. It's more or less like a spiritual journey or a spiritual pilgrimage with the aspiration of growth and faith. And similarly, when people migrate, they have those kind of aspirations where things will be better, they will grow to be better people and have better lives, and for themselves and for their posterity, as it were. It is a journey not just for to reach the physical destination, but for better future, especially for their children or grandchildren, as it were. It's hope that reaching a particular country, there will be better life. There will be life lived in dignity. There will be life lived in safety, where children would get education, where there will be access to all the basic needs that help any human being to live in dignity and help their children to be better people, to be better than them, and better opportunities, as it were. It's an act of optimism, act of hope that the destination or the country of destination will provide something better than where they come from, where they have been forced to live. It's a search for better life, as I said. And of course, for many, it's also search for freedom and opportunities. So how can this migration be a pilgrimage of hope? As we said, search for better life. Just like a pilgrimage is towards sacred destination is hope for spiritual fulfillment. Migration also involves a person or a community, leaving their homes in search for a better life. Migrants, they often hope to escape violence, violation of human rights, poverty, economic hardships, all those things, and look for a better place where they can rebuild their lives and live lives in dignity. It involves a lot of sacrifice and perseverance. It requires significant effort, And many migrants endure hardships. If you listen to many migrants, whether forced or voluntary, they have endured a lot of hardships trying to reach the countries of destination. And, the travel itself, separation from family, the language barriers that they face, the cultural adaptation, all these things, their journey reflects a deep hope for a better future. And that resilience keeps them going because they are always hoping for a better future. And their sacrifices, they lead to a hope for creation of better opportunities for themselves and for their posterity as well. There's also the spiritual and emotional dimensions. Often migrants or in migration, we see a deeply emotional and sometimes a spiritual element. Many migrants may view their journey as, part of a greater purpose of destiny, just like a pilgrim who takes a spiritual pilgrimage might view their journey as a spiritual enrichment. So they also have that look or perspective to their journey as well. They hope there's a hope for a better future, which is also intertwined with a desire for personal and collective transformation, as it were, to become better people and living better lives with dignity, as it were. And with the community and solidarity dimension. So a pilgrimage, as we know, is often not a solidarity endeavor. It's a communal journey. It's a journey, people journeying together. And in migration as well, we see that. We see a journey which is taken as part of a greater purpose of destiny. It's not just a pilgrimage which might be viewed as a journey of spiritual enrichment. It's a hope for a better future. And it's a pilgrimage which is often not it's a communal journey where migration can foster a sense of solidarity among migrants as well as they journey together, supporting each other on that journey. Their shared experiences, support networks, and a sense of common cause, bind people together. And that's why many of them, when they come to countries of destination, they always go look for their compatriots or people of their how do you say their families, or as it were. So there is that community and solidarity which is formed in that communal journey, and there's an element of new beginnings as well. In many ways, as a pilgrimage marks a new beginning, there's also a fresh start toward personal growth for migrants, for crossing borders or moving to a new country, often symbolizes that migration as a perilous journey or a pilgrimage. Migration as a perilous symbolizes the possibility of starting anew, of becoming better people. It represents the hope, the healing, and the peace that they are longing for, which they have been denied from home, and opportunities in a place where they can maybe contribute, grow, and thrive for them and their prosperity and their posterity, as it were. So the other aspect is that of hope for future generation. And I think in most cases, that's what you find, hope for posterity, for future generation. So the journey, it's a journey that transcends the self. It goes beyond the one who is journeying, who is migrating. Migration is often, it's motivated by hope for future generations. And often migrants take a risk in the hope that their children or their descendants will benefit from the opportunities that may be offered in the country of destination, or those opportunities that they have been denied in their country or in their homeland, as it were. So it becomes a pilgrimage of hope as people move with faith in the possibility of of a better and safer and more fulfilling life. So the challenges that are faced along the way, they only strengthen, build resilience, and much like the spiritual pilgrimage, they help them to endure in pursuit of their sacred destination. So those are some of the aspects that we can see when we talk of migration as a pilgrimage of hope. And of course, when you look at the host community, it also demands that the host community be a little bit more humanitarian, as it were. So maybe we can look at the response of the host community, as it were, or the country of destination. When we talk of our response, we really need to look at the care of the first or the migrants who knock or arrive at our doorstep. How do we care for them? How do we respond as believers? How do we allow our faith to fulfill the hopes of those who arrive at our doorstep? The service of faith and promotion of justice, as it were in the social teaching of the church, should also be our response. We look at the root causes. Sometimes when we think of migration as believers, we also need to look at the push and pull factors in our work in trying to respond to their needs. We are challenged that we are in a sense that we need to be the voice of the voiceless, as it were, the voice of the vulnerable, the most vulnerable. And in that way, we create hope. We give them hope, as it were. We help them to be to fulfill their dreams, to fulfill their hopes, that and to make sure that the push factors that made them leave home are countered by the hospitable or the care that they receive in the country of, or in the communities, in the host communities, as it were. And we need to have a response that is collaborative, that is enforced by networking, to make sure that we help them realize their dreams and their homes. Pope Francis, he suggests the 4 verbs: to welcome them, to protect them, to promote, and to integrate. He gives us 4 pastoral action points that guide us and help us and encompasses these 4 verbs, enhancing safe and legal channels for migrants and refugees and other forcibly displaced people, ensuring that the migrants and the refugees, their rights and their dignity is protected, advancing migrants and refugees and their integral development, and enriching communities through wider participation of migrants and refugees, with the recognition of the fact that they also come with some cultural diversities that can enrich our communities, as it were. So with regards to welcoming, so Pope Francis emphasizes the fact that the decision to immigrate should be made freely and voluntarily. Migration should be an orderly process which respects the laws of each country involved. To this end, the following points are to be considered: to encourage the ban of arbitrary and collective expulsion, the principle of non-refoulement, which we find in the 1951 Geneva Convention. I think it's Article 31, which basically says that when people, especially those who are forcibly displaced, seek asylum in our countries, they should not be sent back, especially to their countries where they come from. So this principle of non-refoulement, it's really important. And if it is respected, it will also be part of the respect and preservation of the human dignity. We need to encourage wide exploration of a legal framework for safe and voluntary migration. So also in the areas of the legal frameworks that are in place, some of them, I think, personally, I think they have become obsolete, but there's a need to revisit them and to try and make sure that human dignity in migration is preserved and protected and encouraged, as it were. So to encourage also the implementation of national security perspective that encompasses migrants and refugees. So when we talk of security, and we shouldn't only be talking about ourselves, but everything should be including the migrants and the refugees, as it were. So that will be the first verb, a few points regarding the welcoming that Pope Francis is advocating for. When we talk of protection or protecting the migrants or the refugees, we talk of, Pope Francis he said we need to encourage the states with significant labor migrants that adopt policies that protect. And of course, we know the issue of labor. It's a rather a pertinent one, especially in this era of high unemployment rates, and how we can come up with policies that can protect. And many labor migrants who come from outside, we know that they are exploited by unscrupulous employers who make them work for long hours, and they don't give them a just or a living wage, and they just enjoy the fact that they can hire and fire them willy-nilly, because they know that the policies in place are not so protective, especially for the undocumented migrants, as it were. So the encouragement of states with significant labor migrant inflow to protect against this exploitation, it's one of the aspects of the protection that these four verbs, the verb of protection talks about. Encouraging the adoption of national policies that allow forced migrants to use their skills. Many of them, they come with skills, and in some places, and you find that there are very restrictive, or the legal framework is restrictive, and it doesn't allow people who come with skills to use their skills. And there's some form of gatekeeping involved, and which is not really helpful for the growth of the person, the growth of the country, and for mutual benefit, as it were. So when we talk of protection, we also need to encourage compliance with the obligations of the CRC, which is the children right, the Convention of the Rights of a Child, especially when it comes to issues of unaccompanied minors, and making sure that the domestic law, or rather the Convention of the Rights of a Child, are domesticated, domesticated in the legislation in the country. So there's a need to encourage compliance with that Convention of the Rights of a Child vis-a-vis all migrant children, as it were. So to encourage also the legislation that provides access to adequate and social protection for migrants and refugees and all other forcibly displaced people, and to challenge, or rather encourage the enactment of legislation that impedes statelessness. We know many countries, they have not ratified or signed the conventions on the statelessness, the 1954 convention and the 1961 conventions on reduction of statelessness, I think, and South Africa is one of those countries. So we need to encourage that as part of our protection for the migrants, as it were. When we talk of promotion, or when Pope Francis talks of promoting the third verb, it also talks of legislation that enables recognition, transfer, and further development of formal skills of migrants in host countries. We know that some countries are very restrictive when it comes to development of their skills and their children, especially access to education and training. So we need to promote, when we talk of promoting their interest, that we need to have legislation in place that enables their development as well, especially integral development, to encourage the legal framework that expedite local integration, encourages local integration, helps them to be part of local communities where they are hosted and to fully participate in those communities. Adoption of policies that promote and preserving the integrity and well-being of the family, regardless of the migratory status. We know family reunification, it's one of the controversial issues in migration as well, where in some instances, spouses are not allowed to join those who are in countries of destination, or family members who are in countries of destination, and there are very restrictive laws with regards to that. And Pope Francis laments that kind of thing, because then it puts a strain on the family, as it were. And we know that once the family is split apart, it's very difficult for the family to remain as a family, as it were, and many challenges are imposed on it. So the adoption of policies and practices that presents both forced migrants and citizens with special needs and vulnerabilities with the same opportunities, that there be opportunities for those who are in vulnerable situations, irrespective of their country of origin, as it were, whether they are hosts or arriving or migrants in those communities. And then, of course, the adoption of policies and practices guaranteeing freedom of religion to allow them to practice their religion and their faith. The last verb, the fourth verb, which is the integration, which calls for the encouragement of legislation that promotes local integration, and with the cognizance that local integration is a two-way process of mutual recognition and mutual benefit, if allowed to unfold in a way that is respectful and with mutual benefit for both the arriving and the host community. So to encourage the adoption of policies and programs that actively promote positive narratives on migrants and refugees, that can also be helpful with regards to integration of migrants and refugees. Host communities, donor states, or states of origin should also adopt these policies and procedures facilitating reintegration of returnees, because we know that in migration, some people, after a certain period of time, they want to go back home and live maybe the end of their lives at home. And in some countries, there are no measures or structures in place that help them to reintegrate when they return to their country of origin, as it were. So integration, it's important in host countries, and as it is important in their countries of origin at the time of their return. So there's this Japanese concept that I think when we talk of migration, it can be very important in realizing this pilgrimage of hope, because kintsugi, which is for me, as I see it, our response should be this endeavor to restore this human dignity, and that has been violated by the push and pull factors of forced migration. I mean, from home through the transitionary state when they are traveling to the country of their destination. So all those experiences, that have caused some trauma in those who are migrating. So those push and pull factors of migration So Kintsugi becomes a source of hope. For me, I think it becomes a source of hope for the refugees and the forcibly displaced. And through our faith, we can appreciate better the image of God in each and every one of us, with the recognition of the fact that the incarnation reinforces that image of God and gives the person that human dignity and human rights. So dignity implies that we have worth and not price, because dignity does not change like desires, interests, or profits. Dignity is permanent and inalienable and irreplaceable. No one ever ceases to matter. We cannot give others dignity, nor can their dignity ever be lost, even where it is systematically denied or violated. These are the words of Father Bill O'Neill, a Jesuit who worked in Jesuit refugee service for a long time. So the concept of kintsugi for me, it's a very important one, because as you can see the picture on the right there, when something is broken, it's not in this Japanese art of repairing a broken pottery. When something is broken, it's not thrown away. The pottery, it's repaired, put together, but trying to make it to look even more beautiful than the original item, as it were. And for me, in the pilgrimage of hope should be like that, whereby the brokenness of the human person, they violated human dignity, they violated human rights. And at the country of destination, the person is helped to be on their feet and to pick up the pieces, as it were, and helped to repair that damage and make it, if possible, look better than the original state, as it were. So for me, I think the question is, how can I plant a seed of hope in the lives of those who are migrating? And how can I restore what has been broken? And I think this is the question that we need to ask ourselves when we talk of migration. When we look at migration as a pilgrimage of hope, it should be one, or rather, as the host communities, as people who receive those who are coming in our communities, we should be asking ourselves, how can we plant that seed of hope and realize that pilgrimage of hope, as it were? And how can we restore that which has been broken through the violation of human rights, through the horrible experiences in their journey towards the country of destination? So I will stop there, and then maybe we can have a discussion for a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Rampe. And I'm wondering if anybody has questions, comments that they would like to offer at this point. I invite you to either put them in the chat, or if you can use the react button at the bottom to put up your hand that we can see. Father Rampe, I wonder if I could perhaps open the conversation.
Sure.
And just ask, it's just an observation that as not only as a particular country, but perhaps as the Christian community around the world, if it would be so much more helpful if we could assist folk to migrate to areas where their skills can be constructively offered. Particularly, I'm thinking for folk who are forced to move across borders. They might move into a country that is already struggling to integrate the people they have, but there could be a country somewhere else who is crying for people with those particular skills, and these folk could be offered places to hone their skills. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yes, we used to have, countries like, for example, Western countries, especially countries like America, Canada, Australia, where they would, for lack of a better word, poach professionals who would be used in their countries. I mean, when you look at, for example, countries like the UK, those Western countries, you find a lot of professionals from African countries who have been given either permanent residence and all that, all the necessary documents to contribute their skills there. And no, people with low skills or no skills at all, they are not welcomed. And of course, there's also this criminalization of migration, whereby now, we talk of security issues. It's always like when migration is mentioned, there's always a mention of security. And there was a move to advocate for example, in the SADC region, for a low-skill visa, where you could have seasonal workers who could come in and out of the country in countries in the SADC region and legally and offer their skills, be it in farming and whatever area, and do it legally, and so that they can get a proper salary and dignified employment, as it were. But the Western countries, they're always looking for high skills, and so it becomes a problem. Special skills, as it were. Yeah.
Thelma is asking, how do we balance the pressure of domestic needs and that of the folk coming in, so that it doesn't become a bun fight between your locals and the migrants who are coming in. Any thoughts on how we can balance that?
It is a challenge. I will not deny that, but I think there is an overemphasis on taking care, or rather, not welcoming migrants or the forcibly displaced because there's lack of resources. But in our faith, we at the faith level, we talk of the dignity of the human person. There are certain countries, even though not rich, they can help offer people decent lives, as it were, protection from violation of their human dignity, human rights, and all that stuff. In our country, there has been an overemphasis of saying we don't have resources, therefore we cannot allow any more people. But is it true that we don't have enough resources? I think part of the problem is the greed more than the need. There are enough resources to go around for our needs, but there are not enough resources to go around for our greed. And this is a problem that we are facing, not only in South Africa, but in many other countries, that it is the greed that is causing all this problem. If there was the principle of the common good, as it were, in the social teaching of the church, if it was applied with solidarity, I think there would be enough to go around for everybody. And maybe even those people who have left home, what they call home, in search for a better life, they wouldn't even do that because there would be enough at home to go around for them to live a dignified lives.
So I think what we're saying is that due to the greed of some people within a country, it brings the resources to just those few, instead of sharing across, and there's not enough data, information to test that as of yet, perhaps.
Yes. There's another question, I think, from Mark there, asking,
yes.
what can we, the Christians, do from the origin countries to help our people not to migrate so much? There are cases where families even make contributions to pay the cost of illegal migration. That's a difficult one, and because as we are saying, there are different reasons that force people to leave. The push factors, as it were, and firstly, the issue of justice. What are we doing? What are we doing as believers, as Christians, to challenge the structures of evil, and to try and transform those structures into structures of grace that will help people to stay at home? What we as the church, and when I say the church, I'm talking about the synodal church. I'm not talking about the hierarchical church. What are we doing, as it were, to make sure that we advocate for the rights of the vulnerable, those who are living in the existential margins of the society, as it were? So it's about us trying to find, maybe trying to be the voice of the voiceless, to use an old phrase, and trying to advocate for the rights of those who are marginalized, so that they are not forced to leave and go and seek better lives elsewhere. And of course, there was something about families, they even make contributions to pay for the cost of illegal migration. And it's true, when people in their countries, they feel that there's nothing that can be provided for them by the authorities to live their lives in dignity, and there's no hope, or there's no future or perceived future for their children, for their grandchildren. People will take all sorts of risks, and will even take the illegal means to make sure that their children and their great grandchildren, they get a better future. It's a risk that they are willing to take, and to make sure that their children live better lives compared to theirs. And I think many parents, they want their children to live better lives than their own lives, to be better people than they were, and better experiences, as it were. So some of them are willing to take those so-called illegal means. But again, just because somebody comes across, he or she comes across the fence, it doesn't mean that he's not a human being. It's not the fence that makes us human beings. It's the fact that we are created in the image of God. And with that image of God comes that human dignity that I've been talking about. So I think we have allowed ourselves to be manipulated, or to make determinations of who a person is, because of the borders that those were created. When we look at in the African context, this was the 1884 Berlin Conference that drew those borders. Before, people were moving around freely, and so and that piece of fence, it doesn't make anyone more of a human being and the other one less of a human being. We are all human beings, and we are all created in the image of God, and we carry the same dignity, all of us, and the same worth, as it were.
There is a comment from Nozipo with regard to her experiences, where she says, I became touched when we talk of migrants and refugees, more especially when we talk about children in our area. There are children at different schools who continually attend schools, but at the end of the day, they don't sit for matric exams. How can we assist?
And that's the issue of, I mean, it's multifaceted. The issue of statelessness is also very problematic. And we can assist, there's a lot of advocacy work that needs to be done in that area, especially with the issue of statelessness. I mean, our country in South Africa has not ratified the convention, the 1954 convention and the 1961 convention on the eradication of statelessness. And the documentation of children, then if they are not documented, then it becomes a problem, and then it means that they cannot access this. Some schools, they allow them up to matric to go and to go to school until matric, but then it becomes a problem when it comes to accessing tertiary education. I remember there was in the Sunday Times, sometime in March of 2023, where there was a young man who had no documentation, had written matric and was denied access at, I think it was Wits University, if I'm not mistaken, and he had all sorts of distinctions. You know, he qualified, so he was denied that opportunity because of the issue of documentation. So documentation is also another controversial issue when it comes to children of migrants and refugees, as it were. And there needs to be some form of solidarity to make sure that the government is challenged and we come up with better policies. And that's what Pope Francis talks about in his 4 verbs when he talks of promoting their interests, because then it means making sure that we have policies in place that will protect their interest, the interest of especially the children, for their development as well.
Thank you. Final question comes from Gregory, who says, how do we assist migrants to ensure that they are integrated in the communities without their imposing their country's culture on the community they intend to live in?
The issue of culture, I mean, I think some people, they view culture as something very static. And I think sociologically, from a sociological perspective, there is a general consensus that culture is dynamic, you know, and you can find even in one community where the previous generation saying, you know, things are no longer the same. You know, the elderly people saying these children, they're living. It's because culture has evolved, as it were. So in many instances, I think when we talk of that issue of culture, we should be careful maybe and question ourselves whether are we not being xenophobic, whether consciously or subconsciously, you know. But when you look at culture, if culture is embraced, the culture of the one arriving and the culture of the one hosting, it makes the whole thing dynamic. I mean, in social media at the moment in South Africa, there's a popular Congolese song that is used in many of these videos in TikTok, Kasongo. And it's a Congolese song, and people are enjoying it. This is part of culture enriching the art. We never had this kind of song in Lingala songs in our South African context. But now you see this, the arrival of people from Congo, you know, they've brought something, the music and all that. So that enriches the culture because now people are embracing each other. So we just need to be careful and really question ourselves that are we not being xenophobic, whether consciously or subconsciously?
Thank you, Father. Unfortunately, our time is up, and I want to thank everyone for their contributions, and thank you very much, Father, for a very interesting and insightful lecture this evening.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all for your time and for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.